Okay, welcome back for Benny's second month of training around here to be a trail horse. I wanted to show this quick clip here. I turned my camera on early to show me catching Benny in an area that he's free to move around in. He can go wherever he wants. He can run off. He can do anything he wants. In this instance, he chooses to walk away. I'm okay with that. I essentially just follow along, and one of the things I do is I try to stay directly behind them. So pretty soon they got to move their nose one way or the other to see me. And in this case, he turns left, he makes a stop, and then I come up to him, to his head, and just grab him. Usually he's pretty good to catch, but I think in this case he really wasn't interested in going out because he saw that Luke was getting saddled up as well. But that's okay. He did stop. He does come to hang out, and he's very, very good for getting a halter on. Here I'm putting on just a basic rope halter, and I put it on a little bit, and then I ask him to bring his head down because it's a little high, and I think that it's just polite for horses to help out when it comes to getting halters on. So I'll just gently bring his head down bit by bit, and then put the halter on. And this is a really gentle process. I don't rush putting on a halter on a horse unless I really need to. It's around their ears, it's around their eyes, it's on their face. They're a little nervous. Even if they've had it done hundreds of times, they're still thinking about whether or not they might get hurt. So now that that's on, we head on back up the arena to saddle him up. And here he is getting all saddled up. And I take a few minutes just in between there to sort of wipe his face off. He's got a bit of sand on there. I always make a point to touch a horse's eyes and ears when I'm with them. And it when they come out of it, without any trouble, I believe that it gives them a little bit more trust in who I am and what I'm about, because their eyes and ears are a really important part of their body to them. We've saddled up and we're leaving now. We're heading out onto the road, which is a relatively busy one depending on the time of day. This was a little bit of an earlier morning, so not too bad, but still there's enough cars going by at a quick enough pace that we could test out how well they'll work. Now, this is the first time Benny's been out with another horse, and the horse that we've got with him is a really solid horse for trails and roads. He doesn't get concerned about too much, so I figured Benny would feed off of him really well in the case that he wasn't good already. I do expect that Benny is very good. I don't think that Benny has any problems with cars or trucks or loud noises, roads. He doesn't like manholes, so this is where we had to sort of stop and sort of go around a little bit. I did pause him and bring him back to the manhole on the ground so he could take a better look at it, and then we just moved on so we could keep up. Today's goal was not to start looking at road signs and holes in the road and manholes and things like that. So as we continue on, I was a little bit worried he would get concerned about those white bags on the side, but he wasn't. We just continued on, and every once in a while he would take a munch of grass. But for the most part, Benny was very good about hanging out on the side of the road. Right there's a flag. Some horses would get really worried about something like that. He didn't have any concerns. He doesn't seem to see anything that bothers him, which tells me he's been acclimated to quite a few things. Worked out really well. So once we got across, down the road almost, we got to go about a block. Benny's getting more and more relaxed. As you can see, he's just munching away on things every time we pause. And right about here, there was a dog in the yard beside us that just came out barking and barking. And while Benny was aware, he wasn't overly alert. There's nothing to be too concerned about while cars go by us kind of quickly. So here we're just going to wait to cross, make sure it's safe. And off we go. So there's no problem getting across the road. Benny he leads really well. There's no issue with him pulling or resistant. He is alert. He does keep his head looking around and stuff while on the road, but that's just a good sign, I think. There was no trouble. So as we went along this road here, which is a quiet road, there were a couple of cars that came by, so I thought I'd just have the camera on to see how he does. And while he is a little bit ahead of me while walking, which I don't usually prefer, He's fine. He's just staying alert and looking around. I think that's a really good sign of a horse that that is curious and interested. Here goes a truck. Benny doesn't seem to have a problem with it. He just kind of goes along. Looks good. So from this point, I was actually just going to walk him along this ride. I put the saddle on just so knew he was a working horse. But I ended up hopping on just to see how he would do. And I hadn't really brought any reins along, so I just single reined him pretty much for the whole ride, which he did very well with. And you'll see as we go along. There's only a couple of limitations when riding with one rein. It's a little bit harder to steer as Benny isn't quite accurate with legs yet. But he does do very well in responding to asking for direction overall. So for the most part, there isn't very many places to go. There weren't very many things to worry about. So Benny was a good listener and just sort of kept on task. The other thing here is there's a garbage can off to the side. He could have been concerned about that, but he didn't care. So once we get onto the trail, the forest trail, more than anything, he just went along like he usually does. There's a few things he got concerned about, but again, he's back to eating leaves and ferns and branches whenever he gets an opportunity to do so, which to me tells me that he's pretty relaxed. There weren't any times that Benny really got himself out of sorts, got too concerned, despite that he had every opportunity to do so, and other horses would. Here's some ferns that are sort of covering the path. Luke had a little bit of a problem with it, and Benny sort of just followed his butt along the way. So I turned him back, see if he could do it on his own. And while he did just sort of sniff and go by, there was no problem. So that sort of tells me that things that are across the path may not get him overly concerned, and he can just kind of continue on. And it does help having Luke there because he'll be a draw for going forward and for making it down there. But as we'll see shortly here, Luke wouldn't go forward because he was worried about a small spot in the trail where a stream is usually going through. So to a horse, it looks a little bit darker and it could be a bit concerning. So I just set Benny up. I turned him a little bit because I couldn't get it right because the rope was on the left. So I turned him around, brought him out wide, and he happily just passed right by Luke and continued on down the trail. Being the horse in front now, which is a really good sign. Some horses will not take the lead and they'll be very concerned. And some horses can't stand to not be in the lead. Benny seems good with both, but he seems very good being in the lead. So here's that little dip that they're both concerned about. Benny makes a turn on the spot. So I just turn him back and urge him forward. And when he does make it across here, it's always important to note that after I've urged him through something that got him a little bit worried, that I always take a moment to sort of pet his withers or his neck and just, tell him he's a good boy. And off we went to continue on. Something that is important to note in these videos here and the trails that we're on is his head position. A horse that is concerned will usually have a higher head, so the amount of neck and head you can see in the frame will change over the course of the trail ride. So as we leave the barn, as we leave his home, essentially, he's going to be more and more alert. When we come back, he'll be less, and you'll see how that'll change. So here's Benny's having a little bit of trouble. There was some bear poop on the ground, so he could smell that. He keeps going in turns because I really only have one rein. It's hard to catch him without being able to use my legs on him for steering. So we just keep doing left-hand turns. And right here he goes to make another turn, but I use the rope in a swinging motion, in a circular swinging motion, to urge him to make a right turn. Now he does sort of bring his nose over and discovers that that rope is going in his path that he'd like to go in, and he ends up just going straight. So the point there, though, is not to be swinging your rope really hard, not to be doing it at them per se, but the fact that they have to run into it themselves makes the right-hand turn a turn that they would want to make themselves rather than specifically telling them so. So we made it off of that trail and headed on down another road, and which comes up to our next sort of obstacle for horses, which are other horses. And we're in the middle of horse country, so there are just horses everywhere. And it's a beautiful place to kind of come around. You can see that the horses around here are pretty excited. There's a horse off in the background running off with his tail up. And so Benny picks up his pace. I don't know if you can tell, but he's moving a little bit quicker. We're really kind of going along at a nice brisk walk. The two horses over there take off. They just leave the scene. I don't know why, but Benny just kind of goes along nicely. He doesn't freak out. He doesn't get worried. He doesn't try to chase or follow. He's actually a very good listener, and we just kind of wander on over to say hello from afar, and then I just ask him to keep going on our trail because we're not done walking yet. So we'll pause for a minute and check out these horses because it's just a really beautiful area to go walking in. And then when we're done, we just kind of continue on our way, which was a very good response. I mean, both horses did really well here. And it does help to have two horses or more on a trail ride. Sometimes if they're alone, they can get concerned. And yeah, it was really good. So here we're heading back. We've gone quite a ways and we're coming back now. And this little clip is just really to show that Benny doesn't get himself concerned with cars. He really is rock solid on roads and around cars that are going by. So we're on our way back through the same trail that we saw briefly there. And you can tell, even though the frame of the camera hasn't changed its pitch, you rarely see Benny's head anymore. And that's because when we're going home, he's a lot more relaxed. He's got a good pace. He's got some life in his legs because he wants to get back, but he's a lot more relaxed. And a relaxed horse will generally carry their head lower or kind of even. And we're going up a hill here, so he's got to pick his head up a bit to get up. But for the most part, he still keeps it pretty low, pretty straight. His ears are forward. Very good attitude. Here I'm showing that I keep a very loose rein on him whenever possible. There's no tension on it. Especially when they're going uphill and they need to look down a little bit to see where they're stepping. Maybe there's something in the way. I will just encourage a horse to feel free to look around, look down so they can see where they're going and not trip on anything. And I just encouraged Benny to keep a good brisk walk up this hill rather than trying to trot. So now we're at the very end of our trail ride and back on the road, and it's a little bit busier. Got a lot of cars going by, but as you can see, both horses they're just fine. They just stay on the side of the road, pretty calm. Every once in a while, trying to grab a bite of grass along the way, but we usually just kind of continue on as best as we can. And if he does sort of steer off a little bit, maybe there's a manhole or a sewer or something like that, I'll try to just encourage him to stay to one side. So hopefully that covers a little bit of Benny's trail riding. And thanks for watching. We'll do another one again soon.